February, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel outlined in great detail for the first time the Pentagon's plan to save money while emphasizing special operations and technology for the future by calling for a smaller army, changes in pay, and the elimination of some aircraft fleets, weapons, and bases.
Like, gets you out of nowhere.
Hagel also said the cuts could get worse if Congress doesn't agree to the Obama administration's plan to add an extra $26 billion to the Pentagon budget to prevent some of the more dramatic cuts called for by the 2011 Budget Control Act. The new budget proposal calls for the Army to shrink to its smallest size in decades, 440,000 to 450,000 soldiers by 2019, Hagel said. If Congress doesn't restore money to the Pentagon budget, the number of soldiers would instead drop to 420,000 by 2019, as USA Today reported last month. Previous Vice President Dick Cheney had an exclusive interview with Fox News to discuss the changes in the military size and what he thinks of the Obama administration's plans to lower it.
Here with exclusive reaction, former Vice President Dick Cheney. Mr. Vice President, welcome back. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Sean.
Your reaction, pre-World War II levels, dangerous?
Absolutely dangerous. I've obviously not been a strong supporter of Barack Obama, but this really is over the top. It does enormous long-term damage to our military. They act as though it's like highway spending. You turn it on and off. The fact of the matter is he's having a huge impact on the ability of future presidents to deal with future crises that are bound to arise. I've told you, Sean, the story about right after Desert Storm when I was Secretary of Defense after we won. The first thing I did was call former President Reagan out in California and thank him for everything he'd done back in the 80s to build that magnificent force we had for Desert Storm. I can guarantee you there's never going to be a call from a future Secretary of Defense to Barack Obama to thank him for what he's done to the military. This is just devastating.
You know, I think the underreported story today were comments made by Secretary Hagel. He actually said this. I'll read it really slow. He said, it means we're entering an area where American dominance in the seas, in the sky, and space can no longer be taken for granted.
With talk of both budget cuts as well as cuts to the size of the military itself, students at Thiel College are also taking notice. Billy Vickers, a senior criminal justice major with family ties to the military, had this to say.
Okay, to go off the question, how I feel about the proposed military cuts, I would have to say I am against them based solely on a couple of facts. One is that since we're the only remaining superpower left in the world, it kind of falls on us to be the police of the world, and it's an unpopular thing, especially in this country with a lot of the people, and along with a lot of other countries. But when we don't react to a situation, like with Crimea, we did do the diplomacy, but people were calling for us to do more. And when it comes to stuff like that, as a superpower, you need to be able to react. And with the current administration, it's been diplomacy, but we've shown weakness in our military, and I don't think at this time, with Russia making the power moves that it is making, that it would be the right choice to cut military spending now.
Keaton Ritter, a senior history major with future plans to join the Army as an incoming officer, looked at things a little bit differently.
Well, with my view of the military cuts, coming from a very large military background, I always support our troops. I always want a lot of funding going towards our military because I want us to have the best equipment overseas. But I do believe that there is a point where there is a cutoff needed. When we are spending 45% of the entire world's military expenditures, and the next 9 combined don't even reach ours, I think that we might be overkilling a little bit. But then once again, I still want our troops to have the best things. This is kind of it's a different question for me because I plan on going into the military. So of course, I'm going to want the best equipment possible if I'm overseas in, a hostile area. But at the same time, studies have shown that our privatized military is doing the job a lot better in certain situations. They can get away with a lot more. They have better equipment. They're not as restricted. and they're already trained. We don't need to train them. It's pretty much just like mercenaries, if that makes any sense, but it's just privatized military. You're starting to hear about it a lot more because they're starting to get into the action a lot more, and they're starting to take on a lot more casualties. Now going back to the active side of things, yes, an active soldier, it's going to cost more to train them, but that's what the United States military is all about. It's a volunteer basis. So I'd rather still keep that dream alive within the United States of having a volunteer army and, you know, pay a little bit extra to get that quality soldier instead of relying just on mercenaries to do it for the money and not the actual, you know, thought of, you know, doing it for their country.
The United States spent almost $30 billion more on their military than 9 other countries combined in 2012. The proposed cuts will probably draw sharp criticism from some members of Congress, especially those with large Army bases in their states and districts, or whose economies depend on building and servicing parts for the Air Force planes that will be eliminated. Officials said a revised figure would be submitted when the administration has clarity on whether it will keep a troop contingent in Afghanistan past 2014. With your latest military updates, I'm Taylor Runser, signing off.